revealing my worst mistake. He caught me while I was on my knees with my affair. I never thought I would ever find myself in this situation. I've been a long-time lurker on Reddit, and I've always seen the stories, but never once did I ever think that I would make a mistake like that. Life works in funny ways, and now here I am needing advice and guidance on how to proceed because I have betrayed the one person I genuinely thought I would not. My name is Jenna, and I am a 32-year-old marketing executive. My husband's name is David, and he is 30. We've been married for about 5 years and have 2 kids together. We met in college and were immediately attracted to each other. David is everything you could want in a partner: kind, supportive, smart, and reliable. Yet somewhere along the way, I guess I found myself longing for something more, something different. Our marriage had started to feel like a routine, a comfortable but monotonous pattern that lacked the spark we once had. The daily grind of work, raising 2 kids, and managing a household had taken its toll on our relationship. I began to feel unfulfilled despite knowing that David was doing his best. He was a wonderful father and a dedicated husband, but the excitement we once shared seemed to have faded. It wasn't always like that. In the beginning, the spark was there, and it was amazing. David was spontaneous and fun. He was adventurous, and I loved that about him. But it was as if marriage and kids humbled him. We had great jobs. I worked in David's dad's company alongside David. The pay was amazing, so we made good money. Every aspect of our life was great except for the fact that the spark had died. David became careful, especially after we started having kids. In those early days, David would surprise me with weekend getaways and impromptu date nights. He would take me away on adventures, whether it was a spontaneous road trip or simply trying a new restaurant in the city. We would talk for hours about our dreams and plans for the future. His excitement for life was infectious, and I cherished those moments. But as we settled into our roles as parents and professionals, those spontaneous moments became fewer and farther between. David's caution was understandable. He wanted to provide a stable and secure environment for our children. He became more focused on his responsibilities at work and home, and also ensuring that everything ran smoothly. It made sense, of course. We had 2 young children who depended on us, and financial security was crucial. But I couldn't help but miss the carefree days. David's transformation into a careful and responsible husband and father was admirable, but it also meant that our relationship became more predictable. All our days were filled with routines: breakfast, school runs, work, dinners, bedtime stories, and while there was comfort in the familiarity, there was also a growing sense of boredom. All our conversations also revolved around our children, work, and household chores, and that left little room for the fun we used to have. Even though David transitioned quite well, I, on the other hand, did not. I had always thought that I wanted kids, but after having them, I realized I didn't want them as much as I thought. I loved my fun more than I loved being a mom. I cherished the freedom of going out and doing whatever I wanted without worrying about anybody. As a result of that, David was much closer to the kids than I was. He spent every free moment with them. It was as if he forgot about me and about us and how good things used to be. David seemed to embrace fatherhood with an ease that I envied. He would come home from work, tired but happy, and immediately engage with the kids, playing games, helping with homework, and reading bedtime stories. His eyes would light up with joy whenever he was with them. It was beautiful to see, but it also made me feel more isolated. My struggles with motherhood were difficult to admit, even to myself. I loved our children dearly, but I often felt overwhelmed and suffocated by the constant demands. The sleepless nights, the endless laundry, the tantrums, all of it took a toll on me. I found myself wishing for the days when my life was simpler and more carefree. Before the kids, my life was filled with randomness and excitement. I could go out with friends, travel on a whim, and enjoy quiet moments of solitude whenever I needed them. Now, every moment was accounted for, every action was dictated by the needs of our children. The sense of freedom I once had was now replaced by a heavy weight of responsibility that I struggled to bear. David, on the other hand, seemed to thrive in his new role. He was a natural father, patient, loving, and endlessly devoted. He would often take the kids on weekend adventures so as to give me time to myself, but those times only highlighted how distant we had become. While he was out building memories with the children, I was left alone with my thoughts, and just thinking and reflecting on how much our lives had changed. As David grew closer to the kids, I felt more and more like an outsider in my own family. He was the fun parent, the one who knew all their favorite games and stories. They adored him, and I couldn't blame them. He was everything I wasn't: present, attentive, and fully engaged. It seemed like he had forgotten about me, about us, and about how good things used to be between us. At first, when I tried to talk to David about how I was feeling, the words never came out right. I didn't want to seem ungrateful or unloving, but the truth was, I missed the woman I used to be before motherhood consumed me. I missed the excitement, the adventure, and most of all, the connection I had with my husband. In my search for the lost parts of myself, I started to pull away from David emotionally. I began to seek out activities and friendships that allowed me to escape the pressures of being a wife and mother. I joined a book club, started attending yoga classes, poured myself into work, and reconnected with old friends from college. These activities provided me with a small semblance of the freedom and independence I missed so much. They were a way for me to carve out a space in my life that was just for me, away from the demands of family life. David, on the other hand, seemed content with our family life. He thrived in his role as a father and found fulfillment in the routines that made me feel trapped. He was happy with our family, and that happiness only made me feel worse about my own feelings of inadequacy and loneliness. Why am I telling you all this? Just so you know that I was practically backed against the wall by loneliness before I did what I did. I needed you to understand that my actions, though inexcusable, were born out of a sense of isolation and a desperate search for something that felt lost. David just couldn't understand what was wrong. Even when I finally started to pull away from him, he noticed. He confronted me about it, concerned and confused. When I finally talked to him about how things had changed, about how he was no longer the man I knew, he was bewildered. He couldn't understand what I was saying. Everyone changes, he argued. I only became more responsible. That was expected, Jenna. Change is constant. But it wasn't just about change. It was about the loss of connection, the loss of the spark that once defined our relationship. David's idea of responsibility and stability, while amazing, felt like a prison to me. I needed more than just a partner who was there physically. I needed someone who could connect with me emotionally, someone who could understand my struggles and fears. I tried to explain this to David, but our conversations always ended in frustration. He couldn't see beyond the surface. He couldn't understand why I was unhappy. To him, our life was perfect. We had a beautiful home, 2 wonderful children, and a very comfortable lifestyle. He couldn't even understand why I felt so unfulfilled. It's just a phase, he would say. You'll see. Things will get better. But things didn't get better. The more I tried to bridge the gap between us, the wider it seemed to grow. David's unwavering dedication to our family, which should have been a source of comfort, became a reminder of my own failings. I felt like an outsider in my own life, watching from the sidelines as David and the kids formed a tight-knit bond that I couldn't penetrate. Could forget about the responsibilities and the constant feeling of inadequacy that plagued me at home. It was during this period of emotional turmoil and frustration that I met Matt. At first, he was just a distraction, someone to talk to. My interactions with Matt started innocently enough. We met at a marketing conference, shared a few drinks, and bonded over our mutual love for travel and adventure. He was charming and attentive and had all the qualities that I found increasingly lacking in my conversations with David. The more time I spent with Matt, the more I felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself that had been lost. Matt was everything David used to be and more. He was spontaneous, dominant, and fun, always ready with a story about his latest trips or a plan for his next big trip. His eyes were always sparkling with a zest for life that reminded me of the early days of my relationship with David. In those moments, I felt a connection to my younger self, the woman who loved to explore and experience new things without the weight of responsibility dragging her down. Our conversations flowed effortlessly. We talked about our favorite travel destinations, the excitement of discovering new cultures, and our shared love for the outdoors. Matt listened to me, and he made me feel truly heard and understood. He made me laugh, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of excitement and anticipation that had been missing from my life. As our friendship continued and deepened, I found myself looking forward to our meetings more and more. What had started as casual encounters at work conferences soon turned into regular coffee dates and long, intimate dinners. With Matt, I could let my guard down and be myself without fear of judgment or misunderstanding. He made me feel alive again and reignited a spark that had long been dead in my marriage. The more time I spent with Matt, the more I felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself that had been lost. I started to dress differently, opting for clothes that made me feel confident and attractive. I began to take better care of myself, both physically and emotionally. I rediscovered hobbies and interests that had fallen by the wayside over the years. I started to find joy in activities that reminded me of who I used to be. Matt's attention was like a drug. He complimented me on my intelligence, my sense of humor, and my adventurous spirit, qualities that had gone unnoticed by David for far too long. With Matt, I felt valued and appreciated in a way I hadn't felt in years. It was as if he saw the real me. Before I knew it, we were full on having a physical affair, and as our relationship continued, so did the guilt. I knew that what I was doing was wrong. I was betraying David, the man who had stood by me through thick and thin, who had loved me unconditionally despite my flaws and shortcomings. I tried to rationalize my actions by telling myself that Matt was filling a void that David couldn't, but deep down, I guess I knew that was just an excuse. Each time I was with Matt, the excitement of the affair would briefly overshadow the guilt and anxiety. But as soon as I returned home, the reality of what I was doing would hit me with full force. I would see David's face, his kind eyes full of trust and love, and I would be overwhelmed with shame. I would watch him play with our kids, hearing them laugh, and I would feel like the worst person in the world. I tried to distance myself from Matt to focus on repairing my relationship with David, but it was easier said than done. The pull of the affair was strong, and the more I tried to resist, the more I found myself drawn back to Matt. He was like a drug that I couldn't seem to resist. David, meanwhile, sensed that something was wrong. He noticed the changes in me, the way I dressed, the time I spent away from home, the emotional distance that had grown between us. He noticed that I had changed all my passwords, barely spent any time with him or the kids, and was often distracted or preoccupied. I could see the worry in his eyes, the way he would watch me with a mix of confusion and sadness. The changes were subtle at first, spending extra time at the gym, dressing up more often, and being glued to my phone, but they quickly became more pronounced. David tried to talk to me about it several times. He asked if everything was okay, if there was something bothering me. Each time I brushed him off with vague assurances, telling him that I was just stressed from work or needing some time to myself. But I could see that he wasn't convinced. His concern grew. One evening after I had come home late from yet another work meeting, David finally confronted me. We were sitting in the living room, the kids already asleep, and he looked more serious than I had ever seen him. He asked if I was cheating or if I was seeing anybody. He brought up all he had noticed, but of course I denied it. After that conversation, things didn't improve. If anything, the tension between us grew stronger. David tried to spend more time with me, suggesting date nights and family outings, but I always found excuses to avoid them. I felt trapped, torn between the life I had built with David and the amazing escape that Matt offered. It was like there was a rift between us that seemed impossible to bridge. David became more vigilant. He started to notice every little thing, my phone constantly buzzing with messages, the way I would quickly close my laptop when he entered the room, the fact that I had started using a different perfume. He became more involved with the kids, trying to make up for my absence, but I could see the toll it was taking on him. He looked tired, defeated, and it broke my heart to see the man I loved in so much pain because of my actions. It was at that point that I knew I had let things get this far. I knew I needed to end the affair. I needed to end things with Matt and pretend it never happened. I knew I couldn't come clean to my husband, as that would be the end of my marriage. He would never forgive me. The day of the incident was supposed to be like any other. David was out of town for a business trip, and I had planned to meet Matt at our house. We usually didn't meet there, but since David was out and the kids were at school, I saw no harm in it. I had also planned to end things with Matt right after the sex. Little did I know, David had cut his trip short and was coming home early. The stage was set for my worst mistake to be revealed in the most devastating way possible. I really wish I had never met Matt. I wish I had gone the sensible route of seeing a marriage counselor or something instead of cheating. To be honest, I regret everything. Matt and I had gone to our house and were in the bedroom being intimate. Matt was very dominant during sex, and I really don't want to get into the details, but I knelt down to give Matt oral. I can't explain how we didn't hear my husband come into the house, but all I know is my husband barged into the room. The door slammed open and the sound echoed through the room. I looked up, obviously no shock, to see David standing there. His face was a mix of shock, anger, and hurt. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room and time stood still. David's eyes darted between Matt and me, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. I scrambled to stand up. My mind was racing for something to say, some way to explain the unexplainable. David, I immediately started, but nothing coherent came out. There was nothing I could say that would make this better. The truth was pretty obvious, and there was no way to take it back. Matt quickly gathered his clothes, avoided David's gaze, mumbled an apology, and slipped past David and out of the room. He left me there to face the consequences of my actions alone. David looked furious. At first he looked like he wanted to say something, but then he turned and walked out of the room. and just left me standing there. I felt like absolute shit. I sank to the floor and cried. The realization of what I had lost hit me like a tidal wave. The man I loved, the life we had built together, the future I had taken for granted, all of it was now in jeopardy because of my selfishness. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, just replaying the events over and over in my mind. Every detail was a painful reminder of my betrayal. I thought about the times David had tried to reach out to me, to understand what was wrong and how I had pushed him away. I thought about our kids, who were blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit their lives. The guilt and regret were overwhelming, but there was nothing I could do to change what had happened. That night, David didn't come home. I sat alone in the living room waiting for him, hoping for a chance to talk, to apologize, to beg for his forgiveness. But it became clear that he needed time to process the whole thing. The next day, after I had done the school runs and all, David finally called back after all the missed calls I had given him. He didn't even say much. He just went straight to the point. He wanted me out of the house, and he said he had thought about it and I needed to leave. My heart sank. I tried to beg him to reconsider, but he refused. No. David said I had made my choice and now I needed to face the consequences. He said he couldn't even look at me without thinking about what I did. He said there was no way he could live like that. He said I needed to leave. I couldn't take the kids, but he would still let me see them. All he said lastly was, "Go stay with a friend, get a hotel. I don't care. I just need you out of the house by tonight." The finality in his voice crushed me. There was no room for negotiation, no chance for redemption in his words. I knew he was serious, and I had no choice but to comply. I had to leave my home, my kids, my life as I knew it. I spent the rest of the day packing my things, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to overwhelm me. Every item I put into a suitcase was a reminder of the life I was leaving behind. Photos of our family, clothes I had bought with David, mementos from our travels. It all felt like I was packing away a part of myself. When the kids came home from school, I put on a brave face and tried to act like everything was normal. They sensed that something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to explain it to them. As David had also said, he would be the one to do that. David returned home just as I was about to leave. He stood at the doorway until I had finished. I tried to apologize again, but he didn't want to hear it. We waited until the kids had gone to bed before I left. Afterwards, I booked an Uber to my parents' house, who of course were very shocked to see me as I hadn't told them I was coming. I explained to them what was going on, and they were very disappointed, but let me stay. I've been there for a few weeks now and have been trying to get in contact with my husband, but he isn't really interested in that. That's why I came to Reddit, to see if I can get any advice on what to do regarding my husband. I want him back so bad. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me, the cheater, I guess. I didn't expect the response I got on the previous post I made. It was absolutely crazy. I got so many direct messages and even comments just bashing me for cheating. You all said so many hurtful things about me, like saying I was twisting the story and that boredom was not an excuse to cheat. Let me say this, I never meant that, and I'm sorry if it seemed that way. I never twisted anything. I was just trying to share my experience, but I realize now how it must have come across. On to an actual update, there's nothing yet. I keep trying to beg my husband for forgiveness, but he refuses to listen. He lets me see the kids and spend time with them, which I'm grateful for. They're taking the transition quite well, but I guess that's because they've always been closer to him than me. So yeah, that's it. Not much has changed. I'm still trying to figure out how to put the pieces back together, but it feels like an impossible task right now. Thanks to those who offered advice and to those who called me out. It was a wake-up call that I needed. I'll keep you all posted if there's any progress. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. I didn't plan to update considering the negativity, but I kind of missed being on here despite the hate, lol. Do I have an actual update? Kind of. First of all, my husband and I are getting a divorce. All my efforts and even my parents' efforts were futile. My husband is hell-bent on getting a divorce, and even worse, he wants full custody. I want to fight it, but what choice do I have? It feels like everything is slipping through my fingers. To make things worse, I got fired immediately after my husband kicked me out. No notice, nothing. Working at his dad's company had its perks until now. It feels like I'm falling into a deep depression or something, and it scares me. I'm really struggling to keep it together. The kids are my world, and the thought of not having them with me every day is unbearable. They're adjusting better than I expected, but I can see the confusion in their eyes. They don't understand why mommy and daddy aren't together anymore. I know I messed up. I know I brought this on myself. But it doesn't make it any easier to cope with the fallout. The weight of my mistakes is crushing me, and I feel so lost. As for Matt, please stop asking about him. He blocked me immediately after that day, and we've not been in contact since. Any tips would be appreciated. How do I keep fighting for my kids when it feels like I'm losing everything? How do I pull myself out of this dark place? Thanks for listening, Reddit. Despite everything, it helps to get this out. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. I'm sorry I've been absent for so long, but I wanted to update once and for all once everything had been finalized. I apologize if my updates have been sparse. The hate on here was wild and I didn't think I deserved it, hence why I went offline for a while. Regardless, I am back for a final update. First of all, our divorce has been finalized. I genuinely thought I would be able to fight for custody, but I could not and I lost. I got visitations though, so there's that. Seeing my kids every now and then is a small comfort, but it's a far cry from having them with me all the time. I'm still jobless, sadly. I wish I wasn't, but I am. Job searching has been crazy. Every interview feels like another uphill battle, and with my situation, it's hard to stay positive. To add to my stress, my parents want me to start paying rent soon if I'm to continue staying there. It's fair, I suppose, but it's just another weight on my shoulders. I regret everything so much, and if I could go back in time, I would. So that's it. I wish I had more to tell you, but there's nothing else, to be honest. This whole experience has been a whirlwind. The hate I received on here was something else, and while some of it may have been deserved, it was overwhelming. I don't think I'll miss it on here. Goodbye, Reddit. Thanks to those who offered advice or support, even in small ways. It's been a crazy ride, and I'm ready to move on and hopefully find a way to rebuild my life. Take care.